Hello, everyone. This is Lead with Who You Are. I'm Dia Bondi, and on this show, we explore and discover what it truly means to lead with who you are, and we're doing it with people who embody just that. In this episode, we're talking with Dino Anderson about expansion and leadership. A longtime friend of mine, Dino merges his academic self and his life experience as an immigrant during Operation Just Cause, which was the U.S. invasion of Panama to overthrow de facto ruler Manuel Noriega. Dino is someone who leads with who he is, and that is something we can all learn from. Please enjoy this conversation. Let's go. Hey, just a quick reminder. You can subscribe to this show on your podcast platform of choice. We're live nearly everywhere, and you can always listen to the show at diabondi.com. If there's a leader or innovator in your life who is at their shiniest when they lead with who they truly are, please share the show with them and rate, subscribe, and leave us a review. It makes a huge difference in the reach that the show has when you let everyone else know what you love about the show. Thanks so much. Dino Anderson is an executive leader and academic lecturer, researcher, bridging theory and practice to transform how humans create collective meaning and evidence-based impact in workplace culture. Dino has worked to develop social capital in the private sector with Fortune 500 companies across various industries in software, hardware, media, and philanthropy. Today, Dino leads a newly formed culture team at Articulate, an industry-leading creator platform for workplace learning. And his charter is to evolve their human-centered organizational framework, expand diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, and implement a social impact program. At Stanford Graduate School of Business, Dino co-teaches with Professor Adina Sterling an MBA course called Equity by Design that helps leaders create and build equitable organizations. At Johns Hopkins, he teaches a core course called Ways of Knowing that helps students explore the historical and philosophical foundation of the liberal arts. I want to set this up for us and for our listeners. First, just saying that, like, you and I have been friends for a long time right now. How long is it right now? Is it 7 years? Is it more? 10
years.
Yeah, 10 years. That's kind of wild. That's very wild to me. But yes, we've been friends for a long time. And I think, you and I, we've watched each other grow both personally and professionally over that decade. And I invited you on the show because you're someone who has taken an academic career path and moved it into a work life in business. And I've seen you really settle into bringing your academic self into your enterprise work and your academic mind into your business application. And I wanted to have you here to talk about how you did that, Dino. What you brought with you and how you expanded who you are into the role that you're in now without letting go of who you are as a thinker, a philosopher, and an academic mind. I've seen you put those two things together very elegantly, and I think it's easy for us to assume often when we make a big change, when we move from one territory to another, that we have to let go of who we are in order to make that transition. And I've seen you do a beautiful job of keeping a very integrated self as you've moved from one domain to the other, and now having sort of a foot in each. And I have a first question for you, which is, you can answer in obviously a way that feels right to you, in the biggest, most abstract way, in the most practical, tactical way. But if you right now, at this moment in time, could answer this question, how might you do it now? Which is, who are you?
Yeah. So, who am I is I love to think of this as being like a continuing flourishing human being that's always finding and refinding themselves. So that's who I am, right? And that's in the most abstract way. And then when I think about, in the most pragmatic way, like, who am I? I think about all of the different facets that make up this thing called my identity, right? The first thing in the first place that I go to is, and has been so strong for me, is I'm a foreigner. I'm a foreigner. I migrated to this country when I was very young. And so that has always been, I think, an important part of my narrative, because it always keeps me being an observer. It always keeps me being really attentive to how people act with one another. It always makes me aware of like where the boundaries are in the way that people socially, navigate and interact with one another, and where do I find my sort of entryway, but also push on those boundaries. So I'm always looking for spaces of commonalities with human beings, and also places of where we might diverge and difference. So that's, being an immigrant, that gives me that perspective. The other piece is, that's also important in my identity as I rock this world is, being a Black male in this world, and particularly during this time. The way that I navigate and push on those boundaries, I'm ever aware of that way of pushing and integrating myself. And so as a Black male, I think particularly in the US, and I've grown up all over the United States, like in the Northeast, in the Southeast, in the West, right, in the Northwest, all over the US. And I've had to constantly be reminded of what it is to be Black, particularly in this country, right? And that's not to say that when, in other spaces in my own country, I'm not reminded of that, but it's, being Black is not monolithic. I want to say that right away. Being any particular race is not some monolithic construct. I'm one of the people that believes deeply in a diaspora, and that differentiation and difference that we all bring to this particular identity of being Black. And so it's comprised of so many different, domains and different perspectives. So being an immigrant, being Black, being a male also, I also understand the amount of privilege that I have as a male. I always say this when I engage, especially in work of diversity. I can walk the world as a male in a way that, and as male presenting and, cis male, in a way that I know is not afforded to other people that do not look like me or present like me as a male in the world. And so there's a certain kind of safety that comes with that, or a safer space where I can be. In being a male and walking this world as a male, there's kind of unsaid rules of how you navigate the world. And some of these unsaid rules allow you to have entry and access in ways that you never think about that. And so one of those things that that I always share with people is like, I can walk the streets really late at night and not be bothered, right? As a male, I don't have to worry about my body being a site or a location of potential violence or drawing attention to it in that way as a male. But, obviously when I think about all my other identities and putting those together, then I have to rethink what spaces I'm in and at what times.
And for folks listening, maybe you can say a few words about your home country. You hinted at it earlier, but for folks to understand sort of your origin.
Yes, the origin story as well. I was born from the head of Zeus. No, I was...
Makes so much sense now. It all makes sense now.
Exactly, right? No. So I'm from Panama, so from Central America, and we came to this country, to the United States, during a very sort of turbulent time in Panama, and that was while the U.S. Military aggression started to grow much more in the country, as a leader in that country named Manuel Noriega was actually trying to rein in some control of the country. And what was interesting about my family is that, my father was very much aligned with the Manuel Noriega policies and government there, and as a legacy of the previous president there, which was Torrijos. And so we take a lot of pride in our country, as you know. I'd expect a lot of people to do that. But as the U.S. started becoming much more concerned with Noriega, who they've, installed as a de facto leader, as they became concerned that this person was wresting more and more power away from the U.S., military tension started to grow. And so our family saw that this was becoming a less and less safe place for those who aligned with this leader. And the one place where we thought where we could be the most safe, which is so paradoxical, is the place that is causing the violence, right? That is so we came here to this country when I was very young. I was 5 years old. And, a lot of my education happened here. I learned most of my English here, although we were learning that in Panama as being, by all, ostensive purposes, really being a territory of the U.S. And then came a point in my life where I couldn't return anymore into my country because the U.S. had invaded Panama. For those of you who may remember, there was a U.S. invasion called Operation Just Cause during first Bush that 3 days before Christmas took place and decimated areas of the country where I lived, my family lived, and my father went missing for a very, very long time. And for all, purposes, a very sort of sad story here, but we thought, as one would think with not having all the social media and connection that you have today, if people go missing, you just assume the worst. And so that's a little bit of my origin story. And so coming here to the U.S.
Thank you for sharing. It's very interesting that you talk about who you are in terms of, your maleness and your Blackness and your identity as a foreigner, but I didn't hear you talk about your academic self, which is so interesting to me because it's such a strong component of how I know you and what I know it means to sit on your couch with you, and to grapple with ideas with you and the intense curiosity that you bring to, thinking together on anything. Do you still hold any connection to I know you're teaching still, but it's interesting that didn't show up.
Yeah, no, I think, so that's interesting, Dia. So when people ask, who are you, right, I'm going to go to the psychoanalytic side of me, and perhaps that is the academic side, is, you're asking about the identity is the things that we do in the world. I'm more concerned with how we be and who we be. And so who I am and how I show up with the world, right? The academic is one expression of my being in the world. And why I like to, express that side of myself is because, and it goes back to, who I am. There's always been a safety for me in academia. There's always been a sort of rehoming after losing your land and after, having, as I said, sites of violence occur, where you're from and sort of your homeland being decimated and looking very different. The one place where I always found refuge was in academia. It was the place that allowed me to move unencumberedly, think deeply, ask the questions without fear of retribution. It was the place that allowed me to experiment in a way that I thought I couldn't quite move the same way in the world. And so the world of ideas, allowed me to span different eras, decades, epochs, right? And feel very much, and it is for my academic people, there's this beautiful line in The Souls of Black Folk from W.E.B. Du Bois, where he thinks about, how he was able to maneuver through the world after being rejected, for the color of his skin. And he said that, oftentimes what I felt was this veil come between me and the other. And the places when I felt most alive, this is Du Bois, was when I dwelled above that veil. When I dwelled above that veil, I was able to hold hands with, and he goes into naming all of these thinkers and all of these philosophers and writers, and he felt really at home and seen as a human being in that moment. And so academia, I think that resonates so deeply with me because that allowed me to really explore, what it meant for me to be a human, what it meant for other people too, and for us to contest those things without, I think, as I said, without fear. And so that's a very important part of me, the academic, and as I said, the academic is a expression of who I am.
So if you think about your work today, the work that you do now in architecting and cultivating and building culture in organizations, where do you see your academic mind and practice and your business leadership touch one another or collide? Maybe they collide violently. Maybe they kiss each other. I don't know.
Well, it's same side of the different sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. No. So I think, Dia, where those two things meet one another, I think so beautifully, is especially in the space of culture. And I know this from just people wanting to work on these, is I always see how people get lit up and excited. And I think going back to that place where you're not feeling judged, fear of retribution, where it's a place of inclusion. I want your ideas. I want you to feel unencumbered. I want you to think big, think out wide. But the thing that I do most, in those spaces, Dia, and bringing my academic self, here's the one thing that I learned, right, in being an academic is being a professor and being a researcher. You ask the questions, you enable people and empower them to do that searching and come up with their own solutions, right? And that's what I do when I come into the business world is, I always hold the individual as being, and we use this term naturally, creative, resourceful, and whole, but really I hold the individual with, I think, the brightest of lights to say, you have all the things that you need to make something, to realize something in this place, whether it's the world of work or outside of it. And so I think people trusting that and seeing that, they feel that they can, the power of inclusion and belonging, people feel that they can express their true and authentic self. I mean, we use that so much and overuse it, the authentic self, but I think you don't have innovation without inspiration. And so that's something that, in bringing sort of the academic self into the business world is what I do, is think of my professor. The other piece is I think about research too. For me, things are questions, right? If we had this all figured out, we wouldn't be here right now. And so I think that's something that people need to, sort of like the mysticism that happens around the world of business, because people start talking in these ways with these weird language and these shortcuts and the speed and the rapidness and the scaling and the and the rapid growth, all those things. They start speaking in this really weird way, which, oh, by the way, it's similar to academics. So you think like they have all the answers. They have all the answers, and they don't. The
thing that I have found so rewarding in working and collaborating with you and sitting on your couch is that you're very good at recognizing and making sticky, and this is just my experience, this may be off for you, but is your kind of commitment to the exploration and not an impatience around arrival. Like the notion that the work is never done, you seem okay with.
That's right on. I think, Dia, when you ask about sort of the academic side, one thing that I think about is that in the same place, like in business, not all parts are equal. And so, the academia side that I come from is from philosophy. And in philosophy, the question is what lives. That's what gives it meaning. And so that same thing of not being like impatient with one another is the same sort of thing that I love exploring the question with humans, because that's the place of discovery. That's the place of where you get inspired to try things. If you keep that question in front of you, it gives you, I think, it empowers you to try.
The other thing that's interesting to me is as you've made this transition, and I don't even think of it as a transition. I think when I reached out to you first to say, hey, will you come have a conversation with me on Lead With Who You Are? It was more about like expansion, that you've expanded yourself into business leadership out of your academic context. But I can't imagine that it was without struggle. I mean, when you talk about your own leadership philosophy, your point of views, the way you approach problems, even just this notion of like the what's alive is the question, not the answer, when we always just want to get to the damn answer. Like in that expansion, in that movement into your business leadership and your impact in the business space, what have you struggled with when you expand from one realm and include another? Or maybe a different way to put it is like, what did you feel like was a liability that turned out to be an asset?
That's a great question. And so I think I'll come back to this, piece, Dia, is like, and you just said it, when you try to keep the question too alive for people that are rushing to the answer, because I really think when people are rushing to the answer, it's based out of fear. And so... Oh, sure. I
have that in my own... I have that in my own career and my own pursuits and my own, I want the damn answer. Like right now, what's the thing? Show me the math.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, it's show me the math, show me the thing, because I need certainty. And I need certainty on knowing how to move to the next phase or the next thing. And if I don't have that, I feel somehow, right, at a loss or at sea. And so, for me, it's once again, it's not the answer. The answer is what question are you going to ask when you get there so you can keep pushing it? Because if you ever are running towards finality of things, then it's all done, right? Your project is done. And so I don't think we ever do things like even in sales or in any parts of business, like, right? If we have a land and expand plan, we want to land and expand so that we can open up newer markets, newer places, right? And then from there, see like what's possible from that place, and potentially like since we become even better at capturing more customers, and I hate that language of capturing because it's so colonial, but of gaining new customers, we then think like, oh, then that customer base is going to be influential on making sure more people come. So there's never a finality that I think I have a sense of. So I think the part that was struggling for me is having to balance the people want the answer and they want it, framed in a certain way, and they want it for just now, and they don't want the long-term thinking. That is the one thing that has been really a struggle. And I say this to all my L&D professionals, to all of you who do DEI, to all of you who say it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you damn well know when you're in the world of work, everything feels like a sprint. Everything feels like a sprint. And when you try to be proactive or preventative in what you do, you kind of get shut down because people, by and large, know how to react. They don't know how to be proactive. And we know that. Like, just think about our health, right?
Even how we think about how we present new ideas. We say, this is common language. We just need to show them something to give them something to react to.
Right. So much.
Although that can have an upside too. When, sometimes I need to see something in order to be in conversation with it.
Yes.
So,
yes.
If you can use your reaction and then mine from it, what is the question we're really trying to address with our reaction? Then maybe you find some balance. But I can hear this tension between, your patience with, articulating the powerful question and then staying in conversation with it, ongoing versus the appetite in the business world to wrap things up, to close it down, to finish it, to make it complete, to arrive.
Absolutely. No, I think I think articulation of that is great, Dia. The arrival is a station. It is not the destination, right? It's a station along the journey, not the final destination.
So one of the things I notice when I work with founders, the founders I work with and the leaders that I work with is there's a deep appetite to name the way I do it as the wrong way to do it, and that leaders do it a different way than I'm doing it. And it may be true that, of course it's true that we want to reach into other people's experiences and adopt what works for us, but our own leadership is so contextual to who we are. And it's really tempting to want to carve out a part of us that feels like it doesn't belong right now. Your long-term thinking and your ongoing sort of discipline around chewing on a powerful question for a long time without needing the satisfaction of a perfectly buttoned-up answer, comes. The business world could say, forget that. That's not useful here. But in fact, it's been a really defining quality of your own leadership and why people want to work with you and for you, Dino. So how have you managed to not barbecue that part of you that is so impactful now, but while in the transition felt like it was challenged? How'd you hold on to that?
Yeah. I wish I had, a simple, yes, and this is how I did it. I think, the one thing that I've learned is oftentimes we see the end result or not the end result, but we see the manifestation of so much sacrifice and hard work that's gone into being who we are, being leaders in this space. I think, we often see like, oh, that person has that title and is in that place and how amazing that's been. But the amount of struggle that goes in there, and I think exactly that, the barbecuing yourself along the way, like trade-offs you make. And here's the thing, it's not just like strategy. It's not a perfect line that's been happening. There's been give and take.
Sometimes it's a terrible mess.
Sometimes there's dimensions, your parallel string theories happening.
Yeah.
No, but you move into these spaces, right, Dia, where it's like you lose yourself sometimes on this journey. And I think that's something we have to I want to talk about is like losing yourself as part to re-find yourself and catch yourself. We do that. And so I know there are people that you always give these stories I knew exactly who I wanted to be and then I put the stake on the ground and I marched towards that thing. I'm like, yeah, I've had this stake on the ground, another stake over there. The ground moved. I thought it was a ground, but it was water. And so the part that, always, and I'll say this, the part that for me always keeps me going and the energy that I have to being with the long-term sort of mindset is I'm not afraid of risk. I'm not afraid of risk. And when I say that, it's, I'm not saying go and be risky, but I'm not afraid to be a question to myself.
A friend of mine was telling me a story about one of her close lifelong friends, and she was describing this woman to me. I've never met her. I think her name is Claire. And I know that Claire is a sort of a love of my friend's life, friendship love of her life. And she said, what I love so much about this woman is that it's not that she's not afraid, it's that she's not afraid of her fear.
Yes.
And that's what you're pointing to.
Yes. I think that's a part of the risking, the venturing, that yourself has to be a venture in that. And, we always think about studying the things external to us, but when you become a question to yourself and study yourself in these motions, in these movements, and be that scientific experiment for yourself, and not be afraid to discover or upend I thought this was what I actually wanted. Putting your trust I wouldn't say putting your trust in the process, but putting your trust in yourself to uncover and unlock other parts that perhaps you have not activated, that is exciting. And so I think when I show up like that in the world of work and show up that way in my relationship with my teams and show up in that way too with leaders, I think that has an effect of enabling people to also, right, look up and get into the question. And actually, there's something that I found I have a lot of with people is the ability to trust. It's because I'm not that, I'm not saying there's nothing to fear of me, but you don't have to fear with me because I'm on the same journey that you are. And so let's remove the masks and dance with one another around this. And so I think that, I think with any kind of leadership that's there, anyone who's in a position, that I have been, is you got to find trust with people around you to go on that journey with you. And so whether that be we're going to try something audacious, whether that be we're going to try something really short term and we need to turn it over really quickly, as there's many things in business that you have to do that. Ultimately, I'm here for the long haul and the long term, to be in relationship with one another, not just be transactional with one another.
So as you navigate your way through the work that you do, through the workplace, through the teaching that teaching is leading, even if you're the instigator of other people's, leading with ideas or, their own creative output or whatever their pursuit is. As you move through all of this, what do you find that you have to stand up for the most in your leadership?
As you ask that question, first thing that's coming up for me, Dia, is so many different faces that I'm seeing. And so that image that's coming up right now is, my type of leadership is I often think of myself as being an ambassador and a spokesperson for other people who might not feel like they have a voice or that they're being looked at. So one of the things that I have to stand up for is always ensuring that there's a bridge and a connection to other humans beyond, right, just the sort of business goals that you have in front of you, whether they be material or sort of strategic, is that these human beings that are around you, those are, when we talk about assets, right, those are the most important things. So I see a lot of those faces. Those are things to stand up to, and stand up to other leaders to, always encourage them. I always do this, to come back and be in relationship with one another. I'll give an example of that. Won't talk about a place, but won't talk about any specific place, but there is, something that happened at one of my organizations that, that I've done work at, is thinking about how we might engage with employee activism, right? That may seem so scary, and that may seem like it's just going to upend everything that we're doing. That may seem like it's going to put us in so litigation constraint. That may seem like, think about all the negative things you can go there. And the one thing that I found that we can do during those moments is to actually, leadership, be in conversation with the people that are raising their hands and having this concern. It's the thing that's farthest away from leaders to be like, oh, the simplest and most radical thing that I can do as a human being, leader, is to connect with another human being and to just listen and to understand where they may be coming from. Is so antithetical because we're so used to what structures do we have to put in place to either make it right or make it go away. When oftentimes people, when they're signaling and raising their hands, they just want to be heard. They just want to be heard and know that you hear them. You might have a different opinion than them, but just to hear them. So, so when you say the things that I had to stand up for is reminding, leaders of their humanity and, and their connection to other people in their organization. And I think for me, Dia, just personally, personally, because this happens to all of us, and it's coming back to the fear that I can be the biggest roadblock to my flourishing. It is not in anyone else's power or control to be that blocker for me. And I have to constantly remember that for myself, when you feel like you have to say the thing that's unpopular or do the thing that's not that's sort of common with everyone else, is sometimes we shut down and we don't say that things because of being afraid or not wanting to be seen like the outlier. But I think I always have to remember that, in me not saying that thing or doing that action, the person I hurt the most is not, anybody else outside of me. It's me, right? I hurt me the most out of that by not being authentic and true in that moment. So
if you could answer in one sentence the question, what does it mean for me to lead with who I am? How would you do that?
I think these 3 C's are coming up for me. To lead of who I am, it would have to be a place of care, curiosity, and I wanted to say collaboration, but I think it's really co-conspirator.
Beautiful. Dino, thank you so much for coming on Lead With Who You Are. You're such an exemplar in this space, and I know you've had a strong impact on me in my life. And I would invite any of our listeners to connect with you. Where could they do that?
Thanks, Tina. Connect with me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to connect with me. I am on Twitter, but I'm a lurker on Twitter and reposting things. So I think LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to find me. Just Dino Anderson. I don't think there's many people named Dino Anderson. It's the privilege of coming from another country. You got really weird. Weird names. So that's one place. So just reach out.
Thanks so much, Dino. Lead With Who You Are is a production of Dia Bondi Communications, scored, mixed, and produced by Arthur Leon Adams III, and executive produced by Mandy Miranda. You can reach out to us at hello@diabondi.com or leave us a voicemail at 341-333-2997. You can rate, share, and subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Go to diabondi.com for show notes and to learn about all it is that we do to help you speak powerfully and lead with who you are.